This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there.
From Innistrad to Shadowmoor, what spooky top 10 does Nitzahone have in store?
Hi everyone, I'm Nitzahone, and today is Monday, and that means it's time for this 517th MTG Top 10. And we're getting close to Halloween, and that means this MTG Top 10 is a spooky one. In this series, I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Last week, I took a look at skeletons, and this week we're going to look at another spooky creature type, werewolves. I actually covered werewolves the very first time I did Halloween-themed MTG Top 10s back in 2017, but as you can imagine, a lot has changed over the last 5 years, so it seemed like a good time for an update. Almost all the werewolves in Magic come from the plane of Innistrad, although there are 3 creatures from older sets who were retroactively given this creature type. The ones from the various Innistrad sets are all double-faced cards, giving them really cool flavor that allows the design to showcase their ability to transform. This awesome design has made them a fairly popular creature type, despite the fact that we pretty much only get them when we go to Innistrad. As a result of the new Innistrad sets released last year, the number of werewolves in Magic has almost doubled, and this list looks drastically different from its 2017 edition. To be eligible for this list, a creature had to have the werewolf type. In all, there were 77 cards eligible for this video, and in this video, we'll take a look at the 10 that have been the most successful at Magic's highest level of competition. For a creature type with so few cards, this list is surprisingly stacked. In addition to covering the top 10 as it stands now, I'll also take a look at the cards that were on the list in 2017, but are no longer on it now. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first-tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours and World Championships, and a second-tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like Grand Prix and Magic Fests. Now, let's take a look at the 5 werewolves from the 2017 list that didn't make it this time around. First, there's Arlinn Kord, and yeah, she isn't a werewolf in terms of the game's rules. Planeswalkers, after all, don't have creature types. But there were few enough werewolves around last time that I decided to include her since she's a werewolf within the lore. And actually, she's gained 10 points since 2017, which would have been enough for her to come in at number 10 on this list, but because she doesn't have the werewolf type, I elected not to include her this time. Still, I thought the video should include an update about her since she was on the list last time. Anyway, she has a pretty neat design. On her front, she can buff creatures with her +1 or make a token and transform. And on the backside, she can buff the whole board, lightning bolt something and transform again. Or she has an ultimate that lets your creatures do damage equal to their power to any target. She saw only very sparse play in Standard, hence her 1 point last time around, but she's found success in Pioneer and Vintage over the last 5 years. In Vintage, she's been played in Oath of Druids decks, which look to cheat big creatures into play, and her +1 can give haste to those scary creatures, which is a big deal. She's also a pretty nice value planeswalker up until you can get your win condition into play. In Pioneer, she's been played in Bard class decks, which jam as many good legendary permanents into them as they can, and Arlinn Kord certainly qualifies. She's likely to gain more points going forward, but because she isn't actually a werewolf, she won't be on this list in the future. There's also Wolf-Bitten Captive, whose 1 point was enough for a number 9 slot on the 2017 list, but that's not close to enough today. The Captive is a solid aggro creature who has an ability that can buff itself to 3/3 on the human side, and it can be buffed to a 6/6 on the werewolf side. Its 1 point came in a green aggro deck in the Standard of 2013. Reckless Waif also hasn't done enough to remain on the list as it still only has 2 points. It's a 1-mana 1/1 that becomes a 3/2 when the transformation happens, and while that's a pretty nice rate, the fact is that it's frequently just a 1/1, and that kept it from seeing significant play, even in Standard. Daybreak Ranger also didn't make the list, as it has been completely idle since 2017, and 5 points wasn't enough to make it this time. As a human, it can damage flying creatures, and as a werewolf, it can fight anything. It gained its points in green aggro decks and birthing pod decks while it was in standard. Scorned Villager is the last card that was on the list last time that didn't make it this time, and like the others who fell off, it hasn't done anything since 2017. It can tap for 1 mana when it's a 1/1, and it gains Vigilance and can tap for 2 mana when it's a 2/2. It gained all of its points in Naya aggro decks in an Innistrad block constructed. Alright, let's move now to the updated list. At number 10, it is Village Messenger, which plummeted from the number 5 slot it occupied in 2017. Like most of the werewolves who didn't make the list, it hasn't done anything since 2017, but it had enough points to just hang on. This Shadows over Innistrad Werewolf is a 1 mana 1/1 with haste on one side and a 2/2 with menace on the other. This means on turn 1 it can come down and attack pretty well, and if you're on the play on turn 1, there is a pretty good chance it will be a 2/2 with menace by your turn, since your opponent may not be able to play a 1-drop. It was played in mono-red aggro decks while it was in standard. Its position on this list is in pretty serious jeopardy, as Avabrook Caretaker is only 1 point behind it. At number 9, it is Mayor of Avabrook, which was number 4 on the list last time. While it gained 5 points over the last 5 years, that was nowhere near enough to hold on to its same position. The Mayor is a human lord on its human side and a wolf and werewolf lord on the werewolf side. While it's in full-on werewolf mode, it also cranks out a 2/2 wolf token every turn. In standard and block, it was played in Naya and green-white aggro decks, and in modern, it's gained points in human decks. In all of those formats, it wasn't played alongside very many other werewolves, so the human lord side was the only side buffing creatures. And while that buff does go away when it transforms, its increased size and the tokens it spits out make up for that. Humans decks aren't really a thing in modern these days, and the Mayor hasn't gained any points since 2019. At number 8, we have our first new addition to the list, Reckless Stormseeker. Innistrad Midnight Hunt introduced a new way for werewolves to transform. While it's similar to the original way it worked, day and night are now states within the game. This means all werewolves will be on their bestial side at night and human side during the day, which certainly makes more flavor sense than the original way they did it, where each creature had their own individual trigger. In addition to the flavor upgrade, it also means that werewolves can enter the battlefield on their werewolf side, which they couldn't do before. The Stormseeker is another really good aggressive werewolf. On both sides, it can give haste and a power boost to a creature you control at the beginning of combat. The werewolf side gives a bigger boost and adds trample to the mix. One of the really nice things about the Stormseeker is that it can target itself, so at worst, it's a hasty, efficient creature, and then on subsequent turns it can basically get your new creature to attack right away, and with higher power. This really accelerates the game for aggro decks. It's played in a variety of red aggro decks in standard, and it's pretty likely to keep gaining points in the format until it rotates out. At number 7, it is Tovalar's Huntmaster, another new werewolf. This makes a couple of 2/2 tokens when it enters the battlefield, and that's some nice value. On top of that, if it's night, things get even sillier, since it cranks out those tokens when it attacks, and it comes with the ability to have your wolves and werewolves fight opposing creatures. In standard, it was played as a sideboard card in mono-green aggro decks. It's particularly spicy to bring in against opponents who don't have sweepers because spot removal is horrible against it. It was also played in Pioneer Winota decks, where cheating a Huntmaster into play was one of the sweetest things you could do. Not only did it add a bunch of stats to the board, the wolf tokens he made would also trigger Winota, and if he ever transformed, he could attack and trigger Winota too. Ultimately, Winota got banned in Pioneer, and right now there isn't a clear home for the Huntmaster in the format, and mono-green aggro decks in Standard took a pretty serious hit with rotation, and right now it really isn't seeing play in Standard either. It still has plenty of time in the format though. At number 6, it is Graveyard Trespasser, our third consecutive new werewolf. During the day, you get a 3-mana 3/3 that exiles a card when it enters and attacks, and drains 1 life if the card you exile is a creature. If it's night, it becomes a 4/4 and exiles 2 cards when it attacks. On top of that, it comes with Ward, which makes your opponent discard a card, which often means the best your opponent can do against the Trespasser, regardless of which side it's on, is get 2 for 1. This gives you a ton of value between reasonable stats, graveyard hate, life gain, and damage. This assortment of abilities has made it something of a Swiss Army knife of a creature. It's a pretty attractive card for lots of black decks in Standard and Pioneer, whether they're aggro, mid-range, or control decks. It's going to keep on gaining points in both of those formats, which means it has a pretty good shot at continuing to move up this list. At number 5, it is Brutal Cathar. During the day, he's a pretty typical Banisher Priest type creature. In other words, when he enters the battlefield, he exiles a creature until he leaves the battlefield. In this case, the transformation adds an interesting wrinkle to this kind of effect, because every time it transforms into the Cathar, it can exile something else. So, it can take out multiple creatures. What's more is, as a werewolf, it gains ward and makes your opponent pay life, and it also has first strike, making it a formidable creature. The Cathar has been heavily played in white aggro decks in both Standard and Pioneer, and that's going to continue. At number 4, it is Lambholt Pacifist, which fell one spot from the last list. It boasts an impressive stat line as a 2-mana 3/3, and while it can't attack unless you have a creature with power 4 or greater, lots of green aggro decks in Standard could fulfill that pretty easily. Even just boosting the Pacifist power was enough for it to rumble. It also has the upside of transforming into a 4/4. While in Standard, the Pacifist was played in a variety of aggro decks, including Bant Company and Selesnya tokens. It hasn't gained any points since rotating out of Standard, but the success it found in the format has allowed it to remain pretty high on the list. That isn't going to last long though, as Brutal Cathar and Graveyard Trespasser are still highly active and are right behind it. At number 3, it is Duskwatch Recruiter, which dropped one slot from last time. This is a werewolf which can give you all kinds of value. The Recruiter side has a pretty nice activated ability that lets you choose a creature card from among the top 3 cards of your library to put into your hand. That ability is some really nice upside to have on a 2-mana 2/2, as he provides an excellent mana sink in the later part of the game and helps you find gas. It also pairs really well with its other side, Krowlin Horde Howler, since you can use the ability to draw a creature and not cast any spells that turn, which will transform it and make it so the creature is discounted on your next turn. In both Standard and Modern, the Recruiter has mostly been played in Collected Company decks. These decks specialize in playing lots of cheap, efficient creatures, often including toolbox creatures because of the card selection Collected Company gives you. The Recruiter also saw some play in Pioneer Winota decks while that was legal in the format. Right now, it doesn't really have a home in any format, but it's pretty hard to count it out entirely. At number 2, it is Outland Liberator, another brand new werewolf. While the Liberator might not be as obviously powerful as some of the other new werewolves who've made the list, it's an excellent utility creature. It has solid stats and can take out artifacts and enchantments, and when it's night, it even just gets to destroy them when it attacks. This sort of creature lets you hate on those permanents in your main deck without really giving up a whole lot in terms of power level on the creature. It has already seen play in every single format it's legal in and in multiple decks in each format. In Standard, it's largely been played in green aggro. In Pioneer, the most common home has been Jund. In Modern, it's been played in creature toolbox decks. In Legacy, it's largely been played as a sideboard card in Dark Depths, and in Vintage, it's played in Hate Bear. It's going to keep on gaining points going forward, and it feels inevitable that it will eventually pass the number 1 card on this list. For now though, the number 1 card on the list is Huntmaster of the Fells. Unlike most of the other werewolves from the 2017 list, the Huntmaster managed to beat out all the new werewolves and hold on to its number 1 slot on the list. The sweetest thing about the Huntmaster is the amount of value it generates as it goes back and forth between its two sides. When it enters the battlefield, it gives you a 2/2 wolf and gains you 2 life. Then when it transforms into Ravager of the Fells, it does 2 damage to a creature and an opponent, and if it turns into the Huntmaster again, it generates another wolf, and so on. So yeah, it can really take over games and give way more than 4 mana's worth of value. It saw a ton of play in both Block and Standard, where it appeared in decks like Naya and Jund midrange, and it's also been played in Modern Jund, and more recently, in the format's Ponza decks. All of its points over the last few years have come in Modern, where it's really just seeing sporadic play these days. So, the Huntmaster is definitely likely to continue to gain points, but probably not at a very significant clip. I think within a few months, Outland Liberator will surpass it. So, those are the werewolves that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Are you interested in building a deck with some of these spooky creatures? If so, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in this video. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it. If you want to catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past MTG Top 10s, including many more that cover Halloween-related topics, you should see the playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.